Hayalperestlerin, risk alanların, denemekten korkmayanların cesaretinden doğduk. Bizi asla yarı yolda bırakmayan o sesin rehberliğiyle ilerlemeye ve öğrenmeye devam ediyoruz. Bunun için varız. Bu yüzden gece geç saatlere kadar lambalarımız sönmez. Elveda demek hem hüzün hem de gurur verir. Her şeyi sorgulayarak ve merakımızı besleyerek, dayanıklılığımızı test ederek, sınırlarımızı aşarak, ilerleyerek ve yeni ufuklar açarak yeni bir yol buluruz. Yeni icatlar çıkararak, kendi yolumuzu çizerek. Burası fikirlerin doğduğu ve yeni fikirleri doğurduğu, bizim de doğduğumuz, birlikte büyüdüğümüz ve yükseldiğimiz yer. Burası Yakın Doğu Üniversitesi.
Dear participants, good morning and welcome to the third and final day of the third International Conference on Cyprus Issue, Environmental Challenges and Energy Security. This is our first session. In this session, we will be hosting Retired General İsmail Hakkı Pekin, Professor Dr. Hüseyin Bağcı, Dr. Dursun Yıldız, Professor Dr. Said Akşit, Professor Dr. Nir Boms, and Associate Professor Dr. Hayriye Kahveci. As our first speaker, I would like to invite Retired General İsmail Hakkı Pekin to deliver his presentation. Sir, welcome. May I kindly ask you to put your mic on, please? Hocam, mikrofon.
Okay. Do you hear me?
Yes, we can hear you.
Okay. Then, good morning, everyone. I think I would like to start with my briefing about information. Then describe this Eastern Mediterranean. You know that Eastern Mediterranean refers to Turkey, Syria, Lebanon, Israel, Palestine, Egypt, and Cyprus. Maybe someone add some other countries. The Mediterranean Sea is one of the most important geopolitical and geostrategic pivot in the world history. The concept of the geopolitical pivot is used in the way, you know, that the Zbigniew Brzezinski did in her great chessboard. You know, dealing with the Eastern Mediterranean, I would like to explain something that Eastern Mediterranean, geopolitics, geostrategy, and sea power. As such, the Eastern Mediterranean security environment today is by at least 4 interconnected dynamics. One of them is very important, I think, the energy discoveries. The second, geopolitical antagonism and new balance of power. Then new human security imperatives, increased interest in the area from external power. You know that as for the energy discoveries, these discoveries of the hydrocarbon in the Eastern Mediterranean have been among main drivers of the changing geopolitical and security dynamics in the region. The concept of geopolitics and geostrategy are moving in new directions after the collapse of Soviets and attacks at the World Trade Center and Pentagon 11 September 2001. What definition of the strategic this struggles over the control of the geographical entities with an international and global dimension, and the use of such geographical entities for political advantage. I would like to mention about this. What is the geostrategy and what is the geopolitics? Someone use these terms with place each other, or in the same meaning, not same meaning. One of them is theory, the other is the practice, something like that. Strategy is the geography direction of states' foreign policy. Geostrategy describes where state concentrate in effort by projecting military power and directing diplomatic activity. What is the difference between two? While geopolitics is ostensibly neutral, examining the geographic and political features different regions, especially the impact of geography on politics. Geostrategy involves comprehensive planning, assigning means for achieving national goals or securing assets of the military or political significance. What is the Eastern Mediterranean view? What is the Eastern Mediterranean law? Region is commonly interpreted in the two ways. One of them is the Levant, including its historically tied neighboring countries, Balkans and islands of the region of Syria, Cyprus, Egypt, and Turkey. Challenges in the Mediterranean region, maybe terrorism is very important for Turkey and the other countries. Conflict, like Syria and Palestinian and maybe Egypt, something, and refugee problems. Of course, there's energy questions and maritime boundaries. This is very important issues in that area. The Eastern Mediterranean is becoming even more perilous as geopolitical fault lines steadily unmesh the region. This rift emerged from the Cyprus competition for valuable gas field and the increasingly war Libya and Syria. You know that the main problems in that area, or our concept, strategic concept, blue homeland, is very important, and exclusive economic zone is very important, and also Aegean dispute. Of course, this during this program, this topic separate from the Aegean dispute, but the Aegean Sea and the United Aegean Sea or Island Sea is part of the Mediterranean, something like that. The Eastern Mediterranean has become an increasingly important focus for Turkey's or Turkey foreign and security policy. You know that new gas fields and anti-Turkey group club. You know that the East Mediterranean Gas Forum, something like that, is for four countries: this Israel, Egypt, Jordan, Greece, and the south of Greece, the south of our Cyprus. You know that most of the new gas field and something that the exclusive economic zone, unfortunately overlapping maritime overlapping, and then it caused some big problems between the among the countries or between the countries. For example, Turkey and Greece, Turkey and Southern Cyprus, something like that. Most of the country, Egypt, Israel, and the Cyprus, all of them will be being energy hub, something like that. There's a big race between among the countries for the energy hubs. Turkey challenges Greece and Cyprus, then Southern Cyprus, regarding the energy resources. Turkey wants to compete with the Mediterranean neighbors on equal terms to claim its marine rights in the region by improving its naval capabilities, which are also crucial to secure the country's vital economic interests with more than 87% of the country's trade conducted via maritime port of entry, and a number of transnational pipelines pathway through Turkish territorial waters. The country's naval capabilities have come to figure more prominently in contemporary, but the interlocking of new issues like energy politics and sovereignty rise with all problems, like Cyprus, has created significant challenges for Turkey. Sign international agreement in order to exploit the energy resources or Cyprus island resources or something like that. You know that the southern Cyprus would like to use these island resources and exploit island resources, but someone overlapping the Turkey interest, something like that. A desire to stake a claim to natural gas deposit of the coast of Cyprus has especially stirred the attention policy makes in Ankara. The commencement of drilling operations as well as rumored plans for the buildings of the new Turkish naval was in the northern Cyprus. You know that the buildings of a new Turkish naval base in northern Cyprus are among the most recent signs that planners intend to project greater influence over the eastern Mediterranean. You know that the Turkey Mediterranean shore is nearly 1,600 kilometers length. Turkish Cyprus rebuilt republic. You know that you maybe use this term, Turkish Cyprus Republic, and Turkey defends Turkey blue homeland is very important for Turkey. You know that another problem is continental shelf. You know, sanity or plans or other things to the United Nations. Exclusive economic zone is very important problems among the Mediterranean countries. And also gunboat diplomacy is very important. And also NATO missions is very important. And most of the Turkish Navy several times several duties for NATO in the Eastern Mediterranean. You know that the Blue Homeland and aspirant geostrategic concept developed Ankara refer to extended Turkey political military grip towards surrounding waters and high seas around the Anatolian Peninsula. Specifically, its aim protecting Turkey national capacity through its overseas area of strategic interest. Inevitable such a concept come into focus with maritime delineation dispute across the spectrum, which recently surfaced with the hydrocarbon bonanza in the Mediterranean. At present, the Blue Homeland remains one of the primary political military pillars that dominate the Turkish naval warfare agenda, as well as Turkey expeditionary. As the Blue Homeland unfolds, the Turkish Navy has expanded its role and has already transformed in active player energy geopolitics competition. Due to pivotal significance in the Blue Homeland, Turkey Navy, equipped with unique capabilities and sophisticated equipment like anti-air frigate, air-independent propulsion submarine, advanced unmanned naval civilization system, and also you know that the Anadolu TCG Anadolu, and also electronic signal vessel for the intelligence. Show everything goes. I think should everything goes according to the plans, Blue Water Navy can make significant gunboat diplomacy assets. Besides, Turkey's expeditionary military posture faces the risk of being overstretched in multiple fronts war, ranging from Levant to North Africa. You know that is very important for Turkey. For the Turkish Navy, is the make operations from Levant to North Africa, then also make operations reaches operation capabilities for gunboat diplomacy to Blue Water Navy, something like that. This is very important. These factors together pose grave challenges. The success of the Turkey Blue Homeland concept and its strategic naval transformation aspect. You know that the Eastern Mediterranean is a vital, important for Turkey, and also the Turkish Navy is very important as a vital element of the Turkey to defend the homeland for Turkish rights in the Mediterranean, something like that. Then the role of the Turkish Navy is so important. Then you know that the lots of money spent for the modernization of the Turkish Navy is very important. Then otherwise, Turkey cannot defend the Blue Homeland or the other assets in the, for example, Balkans and the Aegean Sea and the Eastern Mediterranean, and also the North Africa, something like that. There's a role of the Turkish Navy for geopolitical and geostrategic of the Eastern Mediterranean. This is so important for Turkey. I think Turkey continues to modernize his navies, then spend lots of money and need modernize the naval forces. It's very important, and for peace and for war or for during the crisis, something like that. Just thank you very much listening to me. Then I ask, I would like to answer your question if you have time, something like that.
Thank you very much, Retired General Hakkı Pekin, for your nice presentation and for being with us.
Thank you. Thank you.
Okay. As our next guest, I would like to invite Professor Dr. Said Akşit to make his presentation. Professor Akşit.
Morning.
Good morning, Professor.
Thank you actually for inviting me. It's a pleasure being here, and my appreciation to the organizers of the conference and the effort put in. My presentation will be on Turkish transatlantic relations, Eastern Mediterranean, and the changing nature of Turkish-Greek disputes. Basically, the Turkish-Greek disputes is a long-standing problem between Turkey and Greece, which involves Cyprus as well. Cyprus is actually one of the core issues of the Turkish-Greek disputes, dominating the relations between the two for more than 50 years. Discovery of the hydrocarbon resources in the Eastern Mediterranean region has complicated actually the already complex relations and the complex Cyprus issue. What we see here is a fact that new additional points of disagreement with overlapping claims have been part of, and conflicting claims actually have been part of the Turkish-Greek disputes. Here we see that actually the finding of the hydrocarbons issue transformed the conflict from one of negotiations over the Cyprus issue to disagreements over the broader region and claims of sovereignty in the Eastern Mediterranean. And actually, when we look at the context, the period of study here is 2010s. We see that the conflict, the Turkish-Greek disputes, get embroiled in the broader struggle for power at the regional level, not only among regional actors, but among global actors as well. So as actually our previous speaker has mentioned, the region has received quite a lot of attention from global actors as well, major powers as well. And here we can say that the Greek Cypriot administration made actually use of the changing international context. Well, sometimes we can actually, some can claim that this has been a skillful use of the changes in the international context, as well as, Turkey's worsening relations with actors in the region, main actors in the region, especially Turkey's worsening relations with Israel from 2010 onwards, and with Egypt from 2013 onwards. And the Greek Cypriot administration has actually used this environment in order to further internationalize the Cyprus issue by means of energy, basically, and to transform and locate actually the struggle over energy resources from being merely Turkish-Greek disputes to one of a Turkish-European dispute. I mean, this has been one of the main aims of both Greece and the Greek Cypriot administration, in a sense. So we see that actually the Turkish-Greek struggle over energy resources becomes a problem, a Turkish-European problem on the one hand, actually a problem with Turkey and its transatlantic partners. When we look at the support given by various transatlantic actors to Greece and Greek Cypriot administration over the years. When we look at the international context, actually, what we see is basically a changing international context. As I mentioned in the 2010s, maybe it will be better actually to mention the context, the characteristics of the context a little bit. In this sense, we can say that economic nationalism is one of the driving forces during this period. So toughening of politics and actually the rising importance of geopolitical, geostrategic analysis, largely security studies dominating the actually problems of Eastern Mediterranean region in this sense. And here we see that the countries basically perceive political and strategic stakes as much higher than before during this period. Here we can say that Turkey and Greece and the Greek Cypriot administration sort of perception of the region has been one of, or has already been one of a competitive one, let's say, because they have been going through a rivalry already in this sense. And their aims, actually separate aims, have been to establish regional primacy, let's say regional hegemony, if you like, from their main perspectives. Here in the 2010s, actually, with the development of various events, worsening relations with Turkey, Israel, Turkey, Egypt on the one hand, but the Arab uprisings, more importantly, let's say, has created a tendency towards fragmentation rather than integration, especially fragmentation in terms of political fragmentation. And it has actually created a convenient environment for a recurrent bilateral crisis in this sense. And the Greek Cypriot and the Greek actors have been more interested in using actually this changing international context to try to benefit from it and to put more pressure on the Turkish Cypriot and Turkish actors, especially at a time when there were still negotiations going on, and Turkey's position on the Cyprus issue was defined to be constructive, especially between 2010 and 2017 towards the run to Crans-Montana. So we can say that the failure in Crans-Montana was actually one of the main turning points for increasing tensions concerning the especially hydrocarbons and transforming issues in the Eastern Mediterranean region. Here, actually, we can say that the Greek actors were basically aiming to restructure the nature of power relations, first establishing good relations with Israel, and then with Egypt, in order to actually concentrate on exploration of hydrocarbon resources in this sense. So we see actually delimitation of exclusive economic zones, and that being practically put in practice in this sense. So we can say that the sort of developing relations between the Greek Cypriot administration, Greece, and Israel, Egypt, kind of developing into tripartite relations, were representing sort of pragmatism in collaborating on technical issues primarily, partnership of convenience, and then one that the Greek Cypriot administration has largely been focusing on transforming from actually technical collaboration or collaboration on energy, for example, towards military cooperation, and likely in the long run to be transformed into an alliance, right? We can say that it's the sort of relations are far from being an alliance, but given the number of military exercises, there has developed a very strong, actually, collaborative mechanism in terms of the relations, tripartite relations between Greek Cypriot administration, Israel separately. And the policy of the Greek Cypriot and Greek administrations have been to involve as diverse and as many international actors as possible. As many international actors, trying to involve the United States, primarily the European Union, EU member states of the European Union, as well as regional countries. So we see that over time, the technical cooperations, through involving actually multinational corporations as well, has involved regional countries such as Qatar, through Qatar Petroleum, United Arab Emirates, as well as France, for example, as one of the important actors actually in supporting the Greek Cypriot and the Greek positions in the Eastern Mediterranean. And of course, one of the main aims of the Greek Cypriot administration, together with Greece, has been to firmly actually emphasize the fact that there is actually one legal framework, one interpretation of the international legal framework, international law, that is based on UNCLOS, the UN Convention on the Law of the Sea. In this sense, as we all know, Turkey is not part of UNCLOS, the agreement that was signed in 1982 for different reasons. But Turkey's position in the region has been very consistent, and the position actually of the Greek and Greek Cypriot administrations has been to basically put aside such a possibility of approaching the region through other means, other legal frameworks. Actually, when we look at actually how this relationship influences Turkey's transatlantic relations, we can point to a few factors. In this sense, we can say that as the Greek Cypriot collaboration with regional actors have been enhanced, the Turkish and Turkish Cypriot reactions have been also making their challenges visible to the exploration activities in the region. I mean, through licensing, through drilling activities in the longer term. When the Crown Montana negotiations on the Cyprus issue collapsed, basically Turkey sought a more assertive, more proactive policy in defending the rights of Turkey, as well as the rights of the Turkish Cypriots on the Eastern Mediterranean, in the Eastern Mediterranean regions. And from 2008 onwards, this has taken a new dimension, right, which has been actually criticized strongly by the West as well. But of course, criticisms were not only one-sided. I mean, these processes have been outlined quite in detail in various presentations. So I will not be going into those actually details. What we see here is that the Turkish position has been very much critical of US and EU policy towards the region from the very beginning. And the Turkish perception of the EU and US policy has been one of support for the Greek and Greek administration and for the Greek Cypriot administration. I mean, that embroiled with other factors. Actually, we can say that this has created additional tensions, let's say, between Turkey and Turkey and its eastern partners. We can say that Turkey already had various problems actually with the United States. S-400 is one of them, basically. Turkey had disagreements concerning, for example, on involvement of the Western actors and Turkey's position in Syria, for instance, and similarly in Libya. So these factors have been defined as different sort of problems in the Eastern Mediterranean, complicating actually Turkey's relations with its transatlantic partners. So the Eastern Mediterranean Turkish-Greek tensions were additional to such problems. How the EU reacted, if we look at actually the actors' positions, how the EU reacted was a little bit sort of, let's say, differentiated sort of positions by EU actors. We can say that there were actually a unified position given by EU as a whole, sanctions, toughening of statements and rhetoric, for example. There was a very strong solidarity, emphasis of solidarity with Greece and Greek Cypriots in the regions. However, the European Union was unable to act as one, despite the EU statement of solidarity with Greece and Greek Cypriot administration. We see that actually there are different preferences of the European Union countries. There is a major disagreement in terms of how to treat Turkey and how to meet the Greek demands in countering Turkey. So the EU's actions are largely not effective, sometimes defined as face-saving in this sense. And we see that the different actors prefer different positions, such as France preferring to follow a very confrontational and very aggressive approach in the face of what it defines to be a gunboat diplomacy by Turkey in this sense. Whereas, Italy is more cautious and reluctant, despite being one of the main actors in the exploration of resources, hydrocarbon resources. And the other actors, which are less involved in the region, let's say Germany, Spain, are more interested in engaging Turkey in dialogue. But over time, what we can say is that the sort of statements by these actors have been toughening a little bit as far as, defining Turkey as a revisionist state in the region, as was stated by several German officials. When we look at the United States, what we can say primarily is that the EU and the United States have their differences, and they are divided over how to handle Turkey, or their interests are very much different in this sense. The United States is looking from a more broader perspective, let's say, preferring to follow a less confrontational approach with Turkey, mostly emphasizing a multilateral approach, but what Turkey defined to be very supportive of the Greek Cypriot positions. We can say that primarily the United States is interested in countering Russian and Chinese involvement in the region. I mean, there are warnings since the Trump period towards Greece over increasing Chinese investments in Greek infrastructure, including, for example, the port of Piraeus in this sense. The US administration wants to cut Russian influence in Cyprus, especially concerning addressing issues such as money laundering, Russian use of Greek Cypriot ports, golden citizenships that are provided to Russian oligarchs that enable them to bypass sanctions by Western actors. So the multilateralism that was defined, multilateralism in terms of encouraging actually tripartite relations between Greece, Greek Cypriot administration, Egypt, Israel primarily, including United Arab Emirates, Saudi Arabia, in the context of security framework in the Eastern Mediterranean, in this sense, and of course in encouraging to develop Israel's relations with different Arab states. So we can say that support for multilateralism in the region, including establishment of Euromed gas forum, serves the US interests as well as Greek Cypriot interests. From a Greek Cypriot perspective, the İsmet gas forum is an actually platform that can counter the Turkish threat in the region, so it's exclusionary in that sense. From a US perspective, it's basically one that is open to Turkey, but of course depending on how good the relations between Turkey and regional actors are in this sense. And the United States, we may say, is primarily concerned about energy security in the region and control of resources, and less involvement by Russian, especially actors in the possibility of exploring energy resources in this sense. Basically, the United States position has been strengthened by what was defined as the İsmet Security and Energy Partnership Act of 2019 that was passed through the Congress, basically, which defines the US framework and actually strengthens the above mentioned issues. And this also actually lifts the embargoes on the Greek Cypriot administration, trying to bring the Greek Cypriot position into the Western alliance in this sense, and actually trying to cut off the Greek Cypriot links with Russia once again. We may say that several factors actually create problems as well, and these were for US EU unity, let's say, on possible US EU unity towards Turkey. Turkey's Libya involvement is one of them. For some EU actors, such as France, for example, Turkey's involvement in Libya is unacceptable, but for the United States, it's useful in the sense that Turkey has been instrumental in preventing expansion of Russian influence in the İsmet region, alongside expanding its influence in Libya through the mercenaries that Russia sent there. Such a possibility also serves to the interest of some EU member states as well, especially in trying to handle the Libyan transit route that has been very important for immigration towards the European Union. Russian war in Ukraine actually has created several other complications, let's say. One of the things that we can say here is that alongside attempts at bringing Turkey and Greece, primarily Turkey and Greece, as Turkey does not recognize the Greek Cypriot administration, towards dialogue through a NATO framework has been one of the main aims to actually help the sides to cool off, let's say, the tensions in the Eastern Mediterranean. And the changing international context actually served for that purpose. And the Russian war in Ukraine has actually created once again the image of Turkey as a useful partner in the eyes of the Western actors, being one of the main actors that can actually talk between Ukraine and Russia, Turkey has been trying to act as a very strong mediator, actually, in between the two, and has been actively involved in easing sort of certain problematic aspects, such as export of grain, as has been outlined in various presentations here. I mean, Turkey and France, for example, have been on a competitive basis on this issue of mediation as well. But we might say that such a competitive approach towards establishing a bridge between Ukraine, Russian conflict, and the international markets has been rather constructive and not destructive in itself. I mean, one of the important aspects has been actually Turkey's attempts to construct its good relations with Egypt and Israel in the last couple of years. I mean, this perhaps is one of the most important aspects of establishing a more collaborative basis in the region. And Turkey's actually offer for a conference in the region still stands. But of course, one of the things here that needs to be addressed is the fact that the Turkish perception is largely based on sort of a framework of a zero-sum game. Turkey, some of the Turkish actors believe that advancing Turkey's relations with Egypt and Israel would actually curtail Egypt's and Israel's actually relations with Greece and Greek Cypriot administration, which stands to be a more problematic aspect at the moment, because Israel on several occasions has declared that it's not willing to develop its relations with Turkey at the expense of its relations with Greece. So what needs to be done is to move away from a zero-sum game perspective towards a more collaborative perspective, actually, to establish more reliable relations. And of course, Turkey still has a very continued actually negative perception in the eyes of the Western actors. In this sense, Turkey's reliability is questioned, despite the fact that it's perceived as a useful partner in certain aspects. But of course, what needs to be recognized here is the fact that Turkey basically needs to put its policies in a more, let's say, collaborative base to establish its position as a more reliable partner. As you know, the relations between between Turkey's Western partners and Russia is toughening. We don't know yet to what extent this toughening will continue, but we basically one of the things that we can say is that the Russian-Ukraine war is going to be a long-lasting war in this sense, and possibility of mending relations between Russia and the Western actors will not be that easy. So basically, Turkey needs to follow a very skillful balancing act between Turkey, Russia, and Turkey-Western partners in order to create itself the most benefits or opportunities that is provided by the international context. Thank you very much, actually, for listening.
Very much, Professor Dr. Said Akşit, for your valuable presentation, and thank you very much for being with us. Okay, as our next guest, I would like to invite Associate Professor Dr. Hayriye Kahveci to deliver her presentation.
Hello, it's assistant professor actually, so thank you very much for inviting me. Today I will be talking about, well, the energy security in general, but I wanted to kind of describe or put a title called Parameters of Energy Security in the Eastern Mediterranean. And then I intend to talk about a research agenda. So when I check the conference program as well, there are lots of people talking about the energy security and the Eastern Mediterranean hydrocarbons, exploration activities, the competition, the security threats, the drills and military drills, exploration drills. So I thought, okay, what's not done, what's not said. So that's the purpose actually of this presentation. So it's going to be an exploratory inquiry into the definition of the concept of energy security, what we really mean by it. Because when I look to many works that has been done, it seems that, well, in general, there is no clear-cut understanding regarding what energy security is. And when it comes to Eastern Mediterranean, when people talk about energy security, there is lots of like overlaps with the broad geopolitical security concerns within the region. So I am going to kind of explore around to see what are the things that we are doing and we may be doing in the future. And then, of course, I will try to locate this concept within the Eastern Mediterranean context. And I must say that I don't have a clear-cut purpose of proposing answers to the problems that I kind of raise myself, but rather to increase the number of unanswered questions regarding the Eastern Mediterranean energy security. So if you look at the literature of energy security, it's one of the highly attempt to be described but not described, non-described or differently described concepts. So you kind of come across with more than 30, 50 sometimes definitions of energy security over the course of like 40, well, 50-ish years, like 5 decades. So the main reason behind this is the complexity of the energy security itself, because depending on different geopolitical conditions, different geographies, different timelines, it's almost impossible to come up with a fixed universal definition that is ahistorical, because definitely the energy security is a history-bound concept. In terms of its historical evolution, in the academic writing and in the policymaking circles, around the policymaking circles, you would come across with the concept starting from 1970s onwards, and it's not surprising because of the OPEC oil crisis. So since the OPEC oil crisis, we see developing energy security literature, developing energy security conceptual definition attempts. If we look at the initial writings, we will see the national security being the common element, main dominant element in the definition of the energy security concept. It is still inevitable, of course, to put national security aside, because it still remains to be one of the top priority agendas of people who are dealing with the energy issues. But there are, over the years, there are more attempts to make it to be a more global subject, to be a more global concept. So issues of availability, cost, environment, sustainability became more frequent since the beginning of 1990s, and it is, of course, it is not fixed yet. Over the years, rather than being like an economic asset, energy, or a security matter, we see the concept to be tackled in a more interdisciplinary manner, in a more multidisciplinary manner. So you would see international relations discipline being involved, the concept within the frameworks of the discussions of security, geopolitics, political economy, but at the same time within the framework of economics in terms of the supply-demand relations, in terms of the costs being analyzed, societal level, at the sociology level, in terms of, well, how we actually approach to the issue of energy. I mean, even starting from 1970s onwards, the reaction of the people to the oil cuts, for example, was one of the main reasons for the crisis to become such a global phenomenon. And of course, political science is an inevitable issue area where it deals with the issues of energy and energy security. And of course, the engineering sciences. So it is not only a social science phenomenon, it is by nature an interdisciplinary phenomenon. So again, most of the time, when we start talking about energy security, what is meant by energy is still a blurred issue. Most of the time, if you look at to post 70s Cold War period, you see oil is being at the center of the discussions of energy security. Initially oil, but later on natural gas as well. But if you look at to post 90s, if you look at to European Union framework, the frameworks, you would see, or the policy agendas, you would see also electricity coming into the picture. And when you talk about electricity, of course, you talk about multiple sources. That leads to production of electricity. Then you can involve many other things in that, including nuclear. And yet, of course, you see more recently renewables being put into the discussions of what is really meant by energy when you talk about energy security. Again, when you talk about security, then you need to ask the question of whose security are we talking about actually? So are we talking about the security of the producers? For example, when you talk about the oil crisis of 1970s, you were talking about the security of the oil producing Arab states, or we were talking about the security of the Western consumers and their panic. So supply side versus demand side of energy security is kind of developing over the years a little bit unbalanced. So most of the literature focuses on the supply side and the security of supply to the consumers. So here again, the literature somehow has a Eurocentric development on energy security, which primarily concerns with the energy needs of the consumers in primarily industrialized Western world. Demand side somehow remains a little bit undeveloped. If you look at to the historical evolution again of the literature, you would see the curse that is being associated with the demand side states. So if there is a problem there, it's not because of the global issues, it's not because of the overall relations that has been established between the consumers and producers, but it's the curse that the demand side, the producing countries, that is something that is internal to them. So it's not the demanding states that can kind of bring in certain troubles, certain problems to the issue. And again, security of the consistency of demand remains one of the less covered issues. So interestingly enough, it's basically over the last couple of decades, you would see Russia talking more about the security of the supplier. So a consistent, persistent demand for, or a stable demand for the energy resources is being produced is really a subject matter of the energy security of the energy producing states. But if you kind of want to make an overall description of the energy security, there has to be four major components. At least these four plus one, I must say, 4+1 components addressed. So one needs to talk about the energy system, the supply, demand, transfer, plus the sustainability when you talk about energy security these days. Also, I have kind of briefly mentioned about the supply versus the demand balance, but demand side sustain all of this energy system supply, transfer, and sustainability from the point of demand side needs to be included into the analysis. And when we talk about energy security, most of the time the literature covers certain parameters, and those parameters are mainly focusing on the availability of the resources from a geopolitical concern. But again, the parameters of the energy security should be, well, in addition to availability, reliability of these resources, diversity, security, well, security of access, security of the availability, yet again affordability. I mean, it has to be produced, it has to be made available from an affordable price, because if it is not affordable, if it is not coming from an affordable resource, then again it has nothing to do with the security of the end users. Troubles with affordability puts the security concerns into danger again. Accessibility is another issue, not only in terms of the accessibility of the resources and their security, but accessibility in terms of, yes, again, affordability, but the technology and transfer, the infrastructure that is being required for that is also important. And of course, sustainability. So sustainability not in terms of the continuous access to these resources, but sustainability in terms of health, environment, and education about the sustainability. So when we talk about all of these things, I started to ask the question of, okay, where we are so far in terms of the coverage, in terms of the research agenda of energy security in the Eastern Mediterranean. So in terms of defining the energy security, we practically revolve around the issue of energy system. But of course, again, this is a troubling, not in the real sense of energy system. We kind of revolve around the issues of legal dimensions. We revolve around the issues of explorations, and yet the production is very limited. And the issue of the usage of the regional resources is kind of being understudied. The issue of the energy needs of the regional states, plus where is the demand for the regional resources, again, not thoroughly studied. Supply, again, when we talk about the supply from the Eastern Mediterranean, we are still at a very early stage. So basically there is some research being done regarding the Israel's production and Israel and Egypt's production. Still, a lot needs to be done for the regions that are going to start for production, not produce yet. In terms of the demand, whenever you read something on the Eastern Mediterranean hydrocarbons, you come across how important the regional resources are, statements, and how it's going to feed the hungry markets. Yet again, who are those markets is not clearly defined. I mean, everybody talks about Europe is kind of looking forward to get the Eastern Mediterranean resources. There has been lots of literature covering that. But still, this remains to be a very understudied subject, because are we really sure that this is going to cure all the energy problems of the European Union? Or are we really sure that they are definitely in need for the Eastern Mediterranean? How about consideration of all of these regional resources in terms of affordability, accessibility, and the energy systems, the production, the transfer, etc. When we come to the issue of transfer, of course, there are lots of alternative scenarios being discussed, but still, again, the broader framework of the national securities, national foreign policies in interest of the regional states surpass the energy focus. And sustainability remains to be almost understudied subject. In terms of the parameters, we talk about availability primarily. When and how it's going to be, where it's going to be available, but still we don't talk about the reliability, diversity. Well, the security we talk basically, but we don't talk about affordability of it, the accessibility. I mean, how realizable the projects still remains and understudied subject. Again, the sustainability, environment, health, risk associated with it remains to be discussed and studied in the future studies. Energy needs in terms of the availability, again, we said that there has been a limited discussion which primarily focuses on the energy needs of the regional countries and the resource potential, but availability of these resources to the international markets in real sense, remains to be studied. So understudied dimensions are the ones that I have kind of listed a minute ago. Well, the security dimension, again, is extremely studied within the framework of national security. So where do we go from now? I mean, because as I said at the beginning, my intention is not to kind of give an answer, but raise questions for a future research agenda. So it seems to me that there needs to be a more there needs to be a more emphasis on the complexity of the energy relations within the Eastern Mediterranean region. Interdependence needs to be addressed. Of course, this framework is still a work in progress. Balanced consideration of the supply and demand side, and of course, the inclusivity of the sustainability has to be more visible in the academic work. Thank you very much. This is more or less what I wanted to say. And thank you very much for giving me the opportunity to raise my questions rather than come up with answers.
Thank you very much, Assistant Professor Dr. Hayriye Kahveci, for your nice presentation.
Thank you.
As our next speaker, I would like to invite Professor Dr. Nir Boms to make his presentation. Professor Boms.
Thank you very much. Good morning. I hope I'm not hearing myself with too much of an echo. I'm asked to speak about the Israeli-Lebanese maritime border, an agreement that was concluded between Israel and Lebanon on October 11, 2022. I will make a short presentation speaking about this agreement, its ramifications, and its importance and potential importance for stability in the region at large, and of course in the context of what we have just heard in the context of energy in the Middle East. So on October 11, 2022, Israeli Prime Minister Yair Lapid, we should say soon the former Prime Minister Yair Lapid, announced that Israel reached an agreement with its neighbor Lebanon over a long-standing dispute over the maritime border. Now, this process marked something like a 10-year negotiation process. It was the 5th negotiations round. And there were a good number of reports we have seen about this agreement, including in Israel, for those who were for it and those who were against it. It was somewhat surprising, mainly because all the previous negotiations have ended not in a resolution, but the American mediator, Amos Hochstein, was able to create a successful ending for this due to a number of circumstances, mainly the end term of President Aoun on October 31st, the Israeli elections that provided also a narrow window of opportunity to operate. And perhaps add to that, as we just heard, some questions about energy in generally in the Middle East is really the pressure from other partners, including the European partners, to do something that may help relieve at least future energy crisis. The Ukrainian war, of course, have created a significant gas crisis, certainly in Europe and in other parts of the world, and also a little in the Middle East. And the fact that we have proven gas depositories on the Israeli side and potential gas depositories on the Lebanese side made this agreement important, certainly for Lebanon and for the French, who have been also involved in this, because their ability to produce additional gas at this particular time can be seen as very important and in a way a win-win result. I would like to give some context, and here let me see if I will be able to share a little, if I'll be able to share the map that I have prepared. Computer. Not sure if I'm able to share screen. Are you able to see? I hope. So what I'm showing at the moment is the beginning, is the situation before the agreement. And it's important to explain a little bit about the nature of the dispute. The yellow or orange area was the disputed area. I'll show you another slide where you'll see there's actually a little larger area. And the Israel, of course, is in the south. Lebanon is in the north. What else you see here is the depositories, the Lit, Leviathan, and Tamar on the Israeli side. And the next slide will show you the depositories on the Lebanese side. And the dispute really results from the demarcation line between Lebanon and Israel. Originally, there is an agreement, the New Kampala Agreement from 1923 between France and Britain that created a de facto border that is marked with the blue line. For those who wants to go a little deeper, the border question in Israel is complicated, not just with Lebanon. And the border has been disputed also on the land part of the border. We had a decision 1701 following the Second Lebanese War, which was supposed to conclude the demarcation of the land border. Hezbollah, one of the groups that we'll speak more about, militia who has a significant weight in Lebanon, had not accepted these agreements, and as well had not accepted the border or the de facto demarcation border at the sea. And so we have a scenario where we have a border de facto that is not that is somewhat disputed, both at land and both at sea. And the maritime dispute stems from the demarcation method. So Israel marks the border as a 90-degree angle to the coastline, and Lebanon wants to mark it as the continuation of the borderline. And this is also connected to from where do we measure. And therefore, again, if I'm coming back to the slide, you basically have a triangle of sort. It depends on what angle you use. Israel is saying, well, we need to use this angle. Lebanon is saying we need to use this angle, and therefore you have a disputed area. If I'm coming to the next slide, I'm sure you will see in the next slide. Yes. If I'm coming to the next slide, you will see that on the Lebanese side as well, you have blocks. This is a marking method. Of course, you don't see lines on the water, but particularly in Block 9, some initial research and exploration have shown significant depositories of gas, and that's where the Kana depository is. And that also means that there is a significant economic potential. And therefore, if we are looking at again in the line, so we have an oil depository. It actually goes even further into the marked border. So if you see the Kana the Kana depository, which is marked over here in black, it actually cuts the lines between Israel and between Lebanon, and therefore now we have another dispute. We actually supposed to have, it's not substantiated, but let's assume that we have significant resources, and therefore where do they fall? Do they fall on the Israeli side, or do they fall on the Lebanese side? What then follows are rounds of negotiations that are mediated by the Americans, and as I've said, there were 5 of them. On the one hand, if you're looking at the interest of both sides, well, let's start from the Israeli side. In Israel, as you also see here on this map, we already have 3 gas fields that were already explored. We also have the Karish field, and we already have substantive proven depositories, about 1,000 BCT, billion cubic, and this is a significant quantity, not a quantity that can save the crisis in Europe, but certainly a very significant quantity that enables Israel to export gas and, of course, to deal with all of its internal consumption. It takes a while, of course, to build the facilities that will be able to bring the gas from the sea, but Israel had already done that. Of course, if we're able to do more, that's certainly a win. And on the Lebanese side, that's what makes it perhaps more urgent, because, of course, if you have a demarcation line and you have a border line that is agreed upon and you can secure it and you're not going to have a threat by somebody trying to sabotage it, that has been actually the case. Hezbollah had tried to do that for the Karish depository a little earlier, even this year, then you can explore it. But if you have a disputed border, if you have a disputed border, of course, it's not easy to explore it because you cannot secure it. If you have a border, then you can. So there is an agreement, there is an interest to create a win-win scenario, both on the Israeli and the Lebanese side. It will enable both sides to do it, particularly for Lebanon. Israel, as I said, already has began that process and knows how to secure its facilities, and it actually extracted gas. Lebanon, who of course cannot do it with their own resources, they need external companies, and here the friendship came into the picture. But of course, an international company is not going to be able to work in a disputed area that is threatened with fire, military, or generally block of work because you're not working in an agreed upon place, particularly when the Kana depository, as you see on the map, actually crosses these lines. And therefore, there was a need for this agreement. On 2017, January of 2017, Lebanon signed a maritime border agreement with Cyprus. And there were, that was another important, although it was never ratified by the parliament, because if you're looking at the map, Cyprus is coming a little bit here to the west. You have continuing issues of territorial water and economic water that again are not sorted. And therefore, in 2020, Israel and Lebanon continue to engage in US-mediated talks to demarcate the border. These talks are held in Nakura. Now Lebanon claims an even souther line, the 29 line, bringing the area of dispute from 860 square kilometers to over 2,000 or 300 square kilometers. So we are basically going backwards. However, in the next round of negotiations, and due mainly because of what I've explained before, the understanding that the economic needs may prevail, that there is a short window of opportunity, that the president of Lebanon, Aoun, is leaving its post, and that the looming elections in Israel may also create a stalemate here. The last push was actually ended up as being successful. What are the ramifications of this agreement? Is this a significant peace agreement, a normalization agreement, economic agreement? Well, again, it broadly depends who you ask in terms of the people who side with the agreement or against it. Obviously, this is not the Lebanese have tried their best to make sure that this is not going to be seen as an agreement with Israel. This is an agreement with the Americans as a third party. They made sure that there are going to be two tents, that the Lebanese and the Israelis are not going to be in the same room, not going to take the same picture. For them, the optics of it is that Lebanon had not signed an agreement with Israel, but signed a third party agreement that deals with the economic zone. We have the situation in Lebanon where Israel is at war with Lebanon. It's really at war with Hezbollah, who, as I've said before, is a political party, but more so a militia and funded mostly by Iran, and the source of the majority of tensions between Israel and Lebanon. And Hezbollah would not allow a normalization or an agreement with Israel. Hezbollah was the main entity that objected these resolution in the past, exactly because of this very reason. But it seems that there are also Hezbollah who now claimed that they were actually the one who were able to move this forward, being the protector of the Lebanese interest. This was a reasonable strategy on behalf of Hezbollah. They had to justify the fact that there's an agreement, and then they were trying to take ownership of it, saying that they were the ones who were able to push the line even further south. There were some in Israel who actually almost accepted this argument, saying that Israel had given up too much, although the de facto the compromise is reasonable, and what it does, it also leaves the Kana depository, as it de facto is, mostly in the hands of Lebanon, with 17% in Israel. And there is a part of the agreement is that the proceeds will be managed by the French, and then 17% will be given to Israel. So in that sense, it's a win-win. Otherwise, we would not have anything done. So Israel would not gain, and of course, Lebanon would not gain. The other related issue to this is the urgency of which was conducted very quickly, and the idea is that the development will happen. Again, that's very much connected to the energy crisis in Europe. Will that influence other disputes between Israel and Lebanon? Will that influence Hezbollah? Well, all of that, of course, is difficult to predict. When we're looking at the Lebanese arena and the Israeli-Lebanese arena, this has been really an arena of tension and conflict, and ongoing tensions and conflict. Those who favor the agreement, and I would say that I would subscribe broadly to that camp, will tell you that this is a precedent for potential arrangements of a dispute in peaceful means with negotiations. If we will be able to create additional, at some point, additional arrangements on other disputes, this is an interesting precedent that is done really not just with Lebanon, but really with Lebanon within the context of Hezbollah. And one can look at this as a potential, and I'm trying to use my words carefully here, as a potential sign for some future development, and where not every dispute needs to be tackled just with military means, as we've seen with the wars between Israel and Lebanon. So I will sum, and I will say what we have seen here is not a peace treaty. It is merely an agreement, economic agreement that has some significance, really for three reasons. First of all, it has a very significant economic significance for Lebanon in particular, a country that is in a dire economic crisis, and with the funds, if they will actually go to Lebanon and not to Hezbollah, will be very significant for a country that at this point has about 2 hours of electricity a day. It has a geopolitical significance of sorting a crisis, a border crisis that has been ongoing for a while. And it has a potential significance for the future by showing a precedent in an arena where many had thought that agreements could not be made. This is a significant achievement for the Biden administration. And although, of course, there's going to be opposition, and there is opposition both here and in Lebanon, for those who say, we've given too much or we do not need to have an agreement, this agreement will probably be upheld even with the new Israeli government. And I can only hope from here that what we will see in the future will be the implementation of the agreement, and in the near or the medium near future, we will be able to see gas, and we'll be able to see not just more energy, but also some recovery for Lebanon, a country that very much needs an infusion of hope. Let me end here, and I'll be very happy to engage with any questions.
Thank you very much, Professor Boms, for your valuable presentation. And thank you very much for sharing important information about our geography. As our next speaker, now I would like to invite Professor Dr. Dursun Yıldız to make his presentation. Dr. Dursun?
Yes, can you hear me?
Yes, we can hear you, Doctor.
Okay, good. First of all, I would like to thank you for the invitation, and I will also congratulate the Professor Hüseyin Gökçekuş for this, and the organization committee for this very valuable and efficient international conference. I will try to use this 20 minutes prescribed time as efficient as possible, and in my presentation I will try to present a broader overview of the key water security challenges in the Eastern Mediterranean region that this region face in regard to climate change and the changing regional system to me. I also propose some recommendations for a possible way forward. The Eastern Mediterranean includes the southern half of Turkey's main region, Anatolia, its smaller Hatay province, and the island of Cyprus, and the Greek islands and the countries of Tyrrhenian Sea, Egypt, Israel, Jordan, Palestine, Syria, and Lebanon. If you look at the average rainfall in the whole Mediterranean, you see that the rainfall and eventually water resources are unevenly distributed in the Mediterranean region, and the physical shortage of water mainly seen in the southern and eastern Mediterranean countries, as you can see here. If you look at the water resources per capita, and you see the same thing because of the less rainfall in this region, in the eastern and southern part of the southern part of the Mediterranean. You will see the water resources per capita is lower than the other part of the Mediterranean region. What is the key challenge facing the Eastern Mediterranean? And we can list them as follows: the exploration and exploitation of hydrocarbons resources related challenge, and the climate change and water security related challenge, and the shifting regional geopolitical dynamics related challenge. And the Eastern Mediterranean is in a changing regional system to me. And let's look at what has changed in the Eastern Mediterranean in the last, let's say, 20 years, 2 decades. Climate, geopolitics, hydropolitics, energy politics, and its security architecture. And let's look at the climate change and water security challenge in the Eastern Mediterranean region. This region is a hotspot, climate change hotspot that warms faster than other inhabited parts of the world. This is important characteristics of the region, and the impacts of climate change in the Eastern Mediterranean and the Middle East, I will call this in my presentation. These are compounded by specific challenges, including political tensions, social inequalities, and limited access to resources. Let's look at the model results, calculated future change in the mean annual temperature and precipitation. At the left-hand side, you see that the temperature change, and at the right-hand side, you see that the precipitation change. And they use 2 scenarios to get this model resulted. One of them is a low greenhouse gas emission scenario, and another one, the right one, is a business as usual scenario. Briefly, I would say that in 2050, even the temperature and the precipitation will change very significantly, and if the years go by, if we take this 2100 years date, it will be more intensive in terms of decreasing the precipitation and increasing temperature. And I will show some slides which is saying the same thing. You can see here the precipitation in 2040, 2069, and also it is in some places it is less than, at least about more than 50% less precipitation in some part of the Eastern Mediterranean. This is another study which shows almost the same things, almost the same results, and this shows the patterns of changing in annual mean precipitation, and it is again the precipitation is decreasing even in 2040, and it is more intense in 2070, and therefore all these results show us climate changing and what are the primary climate change impacts in the region. Let's look at that. It will lead to reduced runoff and about 30 and 70 of groundwater recharge, and consequently to diminish water quality and quantity in some countries. It will also change the length of dry season. This is important for the agriculture, and it will exacerbate aridness, land degradation, and desertification. This will bring significant challenge for agriculture and it will directly threaten food security in the region. Again, it will directly threaten food security in the region. Why I'm talking about the food security, and I will show it to you within the next 2 slides. Then we can say that energy is important, and energy security is important, as the very distinguished speakers and the participants of this international conference, in the beginning of this conference today, they stressed that water security is very much important, but I would like to add these security issues to energy security they mentioned, and I would like to add these security issues to the water security. Water security is the main challenge of the Mediterranean. Why? Because in the history of Mediterranean, water security has always been a constant factor to cope with, and the literature shows that, and the studies show that the Mediterranean is one of the planet's ground zero areas in terms of climate change. This area is estimated for the temperature increases to be at least 20% higher than the average for the rest of the world. Under the impacts of climate change, together with the growing demand and unsustainable use, the water security and the food security challenge has aggravated. And let's look at some water potential in the region. You see the main coastal aquifers in the region here. And why I'm showing this one is one of the main water potentials, groundwater potentials reserves in the region, which is under the negative effect of climate change. Let's look at the water and food security I mentioned before. In near future, availability of water in the region will be the main constraints to agriculture development of arid and semi-arid countries in the southern and eastern Mediterranean. It's for sure. Without efficient control and proper water management, self-sufficiency in food will continue to be a challenge for most countries in the region. Let's look at the food import dependency in the region. As you see at the left-hand side, different regions within MENA rely on different countries as their leading source of imported wheat. And at the right-hand side, another dependency ratio can be seen. And all this shows us that the region is very much dependent on outside of the region in terms of food security. And therefore, food security remains a major issue in the region. And let's look at the water insecurity results. The water insecurity will create social instability, mass migration, geopolitical crisis. And securitization of water in the region is another negative issue, negative result of the climate change effect. Why? Because in the region, major transboundary river basins are placed in sub-regions. These have experienced severe political tensions in the past. At the right-hand side, you can see the dependency ratio, proportion of a country's water resources that come from the outside its borders. Let's look at Egypt. It's about 98. Iraq is 61. Israel, 58. Jordan, 27. And Syria, 72. And the others is less than 10. That means that apart from the food dependency, most of the Eastern Mediterranean countries depends on the waters which is coming from outside of its borders, their borders. So the transboundary water resources shared among the countries of the region, we can say, constitute the majority of the water resources and created severe political tensions in the past. And therefore, water has been highly securitized in the region. But all these challenges can be considered if we would like to put some plan and some coordination approach and the cooperation approach in the region, but these are not all. What is more is that the big challenges lie ahead. What is that? First of all, I would like to, in order to answer this question, I would like to explain what is less recognized in the region. What is less recognized in the region is that the Eastern Mediterranean basin is a regional system and the interlinkage of the Middle East flashpoints. It's increasingly becoming a constant over the reordering of power relations across the system. Let's look at that. At the left-hand side, Eastern Mediterranean. At the right-hand side, the Middle East. The broader area of the Middle East and the Eastern Mediterranean has undergone significant geopolitical change through the last decades, as it is very well known. And everybody trying to reach the Eastern Mediterranean, including the gas producers, oil producers, as well as the some movements which is trying to shift the current borders from east to the west to reach the Mediterranean. And the developments, well, I would say, the taking place within both Middle East and the Eastern Mediterranean have become increasingly interconnected. On the left-hand side, you see the Eastern Mediterranean and the Middle East security architecture, and it is, energy is an important issue, and as well as water. If the water is insecure in the region, energy security is collapsing naturally. If you look at the regional system perspective to the geography, this very important geography, we see that the challenge of interlinked conflict zones. I would say the scramble for trans-Mediterranean connectivity continues to intensify. And secondly, I would stress that the Arab Middle Eastern politics will feature more prominently in the Mediterranean future strategic equation. The interlinkage of the Mediterranean and the Middle Eastern conflicts has produced a dynamic where relations between regional actors as well as the coalition are in the rapid stage of flux. Let's look at the eastern part of the Eastern Mediterranean, eastern shore, let's say. We see the Syrian, and the Syrian conflict has reached a more complicated stage right now. How about the situation in the Eastern Mediterranean in 2020? It is moving towards greater volatility and unpredictability. Let's look at together with Eastern Mediterranean and the Middle East again. The eastern shores of the Mediterranean region is part of Arabian Peninsula, full of conflicts that will directly affect the conflicts of cooperation initiatives in the Eastern Mediterranean. Therefore, a systematic understanding of the Eastern Mediterranean requires a much broader outlook one that considers the wider dynamics, rivalries, and the synergies in the region. So it is needed a range of perspectives regarding different actors in the region, including global, regional, and the local actors that make up the challenging geopolitical terrain of Eastern Mediterranean. And another issue is that the trans-regional dynamics of the IMMI region. It reduced the ability of Eastern Mediterranean actors themselves to resolve what are fundamentally local issues. How about the current situation? The climate challenge is forcing us to take a new regional view for adaptation. In light of the overlapping challenges and the conflict lines in the Eastern Mediterranean, no quick and fixed solution exists on water security challenge. But we have some recommendation for a possible way forward. First of all, we need a conceptual change in Eastern Mediterranean and the Middle East region, even if it is very difficult, very problematic. But I would propose 3 magic words to move forward: mutually beneficial interrelations. And how? I would answer this question saying that to reduce a tendency towards greater securitization with innovative energy diplomacy and hydro diplomacy. And also, I will stress and underline again, moving forward to food security cooperation. And you see the competitive advantage of can be defined the basis for the cooperation on the map. And some part of energy secure, some part of water secure and food secure in these interrelated regions. And the region has experience on mutually beneficial cooperation in 2011. In June 2010, Jordan, Lebanon, Syria, and Turkey formed a quadrilateral free trade area. And this covered cooperation in energy, trade, transit, and industry. What happens? You can remember that the experiment collapsed with the crisis in Syria in 2011. What is imperative for the countries is that they reshape their visions towards such a mindset once more, and to develop applicable integrated regional development projects. But certainly, the links between the different sectors, water, food, energy, and as well as the ecosystems need to be better explored and integrated into management policies and practices. How about the Turkey's position in this region? Turkey's position is a special one among Eastern Mediterranean and the Middle East countries. Why? At the right-hand side, you see that in the rectangular, you see that Turkey is the only country which has the borders in the Mediterranean and in the Middle East. It's about more than 1,000 kilometers, both of them. That means that Turkey is physically, geographically, directly related with the region, both regions, IMMI regions, Eastern Mediterranean and the Middle East. This will give Turkey's role is essential for peace and prosperity in the region. And then let's go into details in the last slides, in my last slides. What is Turkey's role in regional system perspective? And the Eastern Mediterranean and the Middle East are in an interrelated, changing regional system. And this has already changed the security architecture and increased uncertainties in the Eastern Mediterranean. Therefore, strategic projections for this region should take into account the local, regional and the global developments, many regional variables, and the possibility of their rapid change. But sooner or later, the countries in the Eastern Mediterranean will realize that regional prosperity, water, energy, security, and the peaceful future need a pragmatic model for a regional cooperation, gathering, not excluding some countries, gathering all countries, including Turkey, because Turkey will play essential role both the Eastern Med and the Middle East peace and prosperity. Finally, we can say that because of very specific characteristics of the region and trans-regional dynamics, the task of developing new regional cooperation on climate change adaptation and water, food, energy security challenge in this increasingly polarized environment is becoming more and more urgent, and at the same time more complicated. It will be difficult, but not impossible, as long as there is political will on all sides. Thank you very much for your listening to me, and I hope that the presentation will be beneficial for the audience.
Thank you very much, Professor Dursun Yıldız, for your valuable presentation and your contributions. Before I move on to our next speaker, Professor Dr. Hüseyin Bağcı, we have a question on the YouTube channel to Professor Boms. Professor Boms, Mr. Bülent Şenses is asking, Doctor, do you think that in the near future Israel might have the same diplomatic technique to dispute their maritime jurisdiction borders with the ENÇESU?
Well, this is actually a very interesting question that is related to a larger issue. I've been involved in direct conversations with our colleagues from Turkey. Another related question, which is whether we will be able to create a pipeline that will go through Turkey rather than through perhaps the longer route for Cyprus, and will enable to certainly from the Turkish side help create an energy depository and to pass gas. Of course, as you know, and this issue is not simple because of the disputes between the Turkish Republic of Northern Cyprus and Cyprus, and it could be because of the disputes between Turkey and Greece, but also because of the quantity of the gas. Israel does not have enough gas to justify another pipe line that will go all the way through Turkey. I think that it's not going to be an arrangement between Israel alone. If we're going to be able to get a dispute and a resolution of these disputes, it will have to be another regional infrastructure. And I think that the energy component will actually may be critical for it. It will be able to create a win-win scenario between and showing that we're able to have enough gas, perhaps because of the additional quantities at Kana, and if we'll be able to find more, then we may see a gas pipeline going towards Cyprus with a split that goes through the territorial water of northern Cyprus and to Turkey on the one hand, and to Europe through Cyprus and Greece on the other. That would be probably the best win-win scenario to the entire region. And I think that Israel will be very happy to give its own hand to this type of a scenario. But I do not think that Israel will agree to just a bilateral arrangement that potentially will have other complications when it comes to the other partners Cyprus and Europe.
Okay, thank you very much, Professor Boms, for your answer. I hope this satisfies the question of Mr. Bülent Eces. Thank you very much. Okay, I will be directing the questions as much as we have during the presentations. As our next speaker, now I would like to invite Professor Dr. Hüseyin Bağcı. Professor, welcome. Professor, your microphone is muted. Professor, unfortunately, we cannot hear you. Professor, can you please check your... Okay, I think Professor Hüseyin Bağcı is having some problems with the speakers, and hopefully it will be sorted soon. Okay, my friends are helping me at the background to solve this issue, and hopefully we will have the speakers on for Professor Hüseyin Bağcı as soon as possible. Okay, until we solve this issue, perhaps we can have a short introductory video. Reklama girelim. Hüseyin Hocam. Professor Hüseyin. Can you please unmute your microphone?
It's okay.
Professor, we can hear you now.
Getiriyorlar kabloyu kulaklığı şey. Tamam mı oğlum söyle.
Professor, we can hear you now. Well, Professor, unfortunately, we lost the sound again. If you can put the microphone or if you can put your headphones on, maybe we will be able to hear you. Yes, Professor? We can hear you now, but your voice is too low. Okay, we will be having another short break for 1 minute of commercial, and then we will be back with you.
Ara telefonu.
Catching a bus, never nothing when it's real, yeah it does. I'm flying above, no bluffing, no worry, keep it cold, yeah I'll be saying something. Sipping from Chicago, can you feel the rush? So let's go. Feel the rush, feel the rush. Adrenaline running through us.
Eğer ki hayatımızda hiç eğer olmasaydı nasıl olurdu? Size şöyle söyleyeyim. Her şey daha az parlak, daha az yeşil olurdu ve daha az parlak yeşil. Çünkü eğerler ormanların derinliklerinde tek bir kibritle derinlerin kıvılcımını ateşler. Eğerler Nobel ve Guggenheim'ın aklına takılır ve o kodu bu kodu çözerler. Eğerlerle içinizden haykırmak gelir. Eğerler bariyerleri kırarlar. Asla yalnız yürümezler ve aşırı bulaşıcıdırlar. Eğerler aşikardır ve son anda golü atarlar. Eğerler dünü umursamazlar. Robotlarla bile konuşabilirler. Karşı takım soluklanırken oynamaya durmadan devam ederler. Sadece basit bir kelime öyle mi? Hayır. Eğerler asla uyumazlar. Hep daha fazla çaba gösterirler. Eğerler bakar, araştırır ve en beklenmedik zamanda ortaya çıkarlar. Eğerler klonlanarak çoğalırlar. Acaba gerçekten yapabilir misin? Yaptın bile. Eğerler aklınıza girmeye çalışan güler yüzlü şakacılardır. Eğerler kapıları açarlar. Asla kaybetmeyeceklerini bilirler. Ve biraz gün ışığına her zaman hazırdırlar. Her şey bir eğerle başlar. Çünkü eğerler ne zaman dönüşür, ne zamanlarsa şimdi. Ve şimdi nasıla dönüşür. Nasılsa asıl. Eğerler bakış açınızı değiştirir. Eğerler oyunu değiştirir. Eğerler dünyayı değiştirir. Biliyoruz. Çünkü biz eğerlerle çalışıyoruz. Yakın Doğu Üniversitesi.
Hello and welcome back. Unfortunately, we were having some speaker problems. We couldn't hear Professor Hüseyin Bağcı. For one last time, I am trying my luck. Professor, can you hear me? Okay, I guess we still don't have the sound. I would like to end this session, and Professor Bağcı will be our first speaker in the next session, which will start in 10 minutes. Thank you very much for being with us.
Hayalperestlerin, risk alanların, denemekten korkmayanların cesaretinden doğduk. Bizi asla yarı yolda bırakmayan o sesin rehberliğiyle ilerlemeye ve öğrenmeye devam ediyoruz. Bunun için varız. Bu yüzden gece geç saatlere kadar lambalarımız sönmez. Elveda demek hem hüzün hem de gurur verir. Her şeyi sorgulayarak ve merakımızı besleyerek, dayanıklılığımızı test ederek, sınırlarımızı aşarak, ilerleyerek ve yeni ufuklar açarak yeni bir yol buluruz. Yeni icatlar çıkararak, kendi yolumuzu çizerek. Burası fikirlerin doğduğu ve yeni fikirleri doğurduğu, bizim de doğduğumuz, birlikte büyüdüğümüz ve yükseldiğimiz yer. Burası Yakın Doğu Üniversitesi.